all of our presenters that took the time, all the people that showed up. Also, our presenter here today, Jihan. I've known Jihan since I was a teenager. I've learned from her for since I was a teenager about so many different environmental issues. And to come full circle in this way is just beautiful. I just also want to give a shout out to Mariah for recommending John in this space, especially with this. She's going to teach me something new, another tool. And I'm so thankful for her talent, Jahan. You're watching and experiencing your art just through my phone on Instagram. It's just been so beautiful. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom today. And again, to everyone that's in our circle today.
Cool. Yeah, Crystal. I see most of you all don't want to show your beautiful faces, and that's okay. But how do I do this? Okay, I guess I'll leave it like this. Um, Yat a she Jihan Gearon yenishya. Twitch eatni nishle do na hisle bashichin. Lashe edasha chedo na hisle dashanene. My name is Jihan Gearon. I'm Navajo on my mom's side, the Bitterwater clan, and I'm Black on my father's side. I come from Old Sawmill, Arizona, if any of you know the reservation. And now I live here at the base of Dogo Slede in Flagstaff, Arizona. Yeah, so I'm just happy to be here. I also love this time of year. It's been one of my most favorite times of year since I was little. So I'm excited to talk about it and get into it. But I don't know how y'all feel. We're a pretty small group here, but I wanted to also invite you all to introduce yourselves, even if those who haven't, if you want to do it via the chat or something like that, that's fine. I will be asking you all to like pipe in every now and then during this, but what I want to offer today um, is more coming from my side as an artist. You can see like there's some of my paintings behind me. I'm in my workroom, my studio room, in my office. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about me, a little bit about my art. And, as Crystal said, I've lived most of my life as an environmental justice activist, focusing on Navajo Nation and also in Indigenous communities. But I've moved into making art and painting a big part of my life as well. And so I just want to talk a little bit about that. I don't want to spend too much time there, but really share with you kind of what art does for me, outside of like being something pretty to hang on the wall, really what I've learned from it and how that connects to Ganja and this time of year. I'm going to dive a little bit into that, how this time of year relates to our cultures, including some like questions and debatable pieces of that. And then I want to lead you all in like some free writing to help you center in this time of year. And then we're going to talk about how you might turn some of that inspiration into art. And then if we want to, we'll have some Q&A at the end. So that is my plan for you. Um, let's get started. Uh, Great. So I'm going to have to maybe wing some of this because some of it is even new for me, but and please, like, since I can't really see you as I have my PowerPoint open, like, unmute yourself and talk if there's something you need to ask, but uh or you want to pipe in, but I'll also try and pause and have some moments for that. Actually, one thing I wanted to ask you all is if you can introduce yourself via the chat. Um, and I'm curious to know, what is the role of art in your life? If you could put that in the chat as well, and we'll take a look at it. In the meantime, we'll tell you a little bit about myself. These are just pictures of me as a young activist. Um, you know, Crystal said she knew me when she was a teenager. I was also much younger. But here we are. But I've been working as environmental justice and climate justice activist for almost 20 years with lots of different organizations here in our region, I ran an organization called the Black Mesa Water Coalition for 8.5 years, and transitioned out of that in 2019. Um, I'm not going to dig into like the specifics of all that work and stuff right now. Um, I just want to give you these little snippets. A lot of our work when I was the ED of BMWC was focused on developing economic um, demonstration projects and pilot projects um, that demonstrated an economy outside of the fossil fuel economy on the Navajo Nation, um, movement building and connecting with other communities outside of the Navajo Nation and even outside of Indian country was always very important to me. And up there at the top right is one of my favorite things I did before I left BNWC, which was to host an Indigenous feminist organizing school, because I'm a very proud feminist. And that's a lot of a focus of my art and my work that I do now. This looks more complicated than it is. Part of our work in working with a lot of non-Indigenous communities was to develop this thing called the Just Transition Framework, which is really about like, how do we engage in the work of transitioning our economies? What are the different entry points? And how do they all work together, right? So I don't want to, very briefly, on the left side is the extractive side, bad stuff, right? On the right side is the living economy, good stuff, what we want. And those arrows are kind of strategies for transitioning from one to the other. This also says that in every economy, there are 5 pillars. There are resources, how they're used, work, how it is used for a common purpose that are upheld by a worldview and a governance system. And through all of my 15 plus years of organizing, I think I really, towards the end of my time at BMWC and like more clearly in the movement as a nonprofit staff person, I was really struck on this kind of the values filter at the very bottom, because I think we came up with a lot of ideas. We have all the logic of why, for example, the coal economy is bad, all the like reports of how a solar project of the Navajo Nation would be great, but there was something missing that really kept our tribal leaders or even our people from believing in it, right? And so I think our work started to take a turn into a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing that Indigenous Lifeways does, which is to bring back kind of our traditions into our modern society and incorporate them in the here and now. But I feel like that's such an important part of all of the work that we don't see happen. Yes? Okay, I thought I heard someone talking, but I'm going to keep going. Um, just the importance of what are our strategies to like change our culture, build up the hope of people, build up the knowledge of people, have people unlearn all of the things that we've been brought up to believe, to really create a way forward. And for me, that's a big part of why art has come into my life. So this is one of my first paintings. It's called Chahayesh, which is the dawn, right? So I forgot to mention also in 2017, I was diagnosed with endometrial cancer. So for me, that was a big push, to change my life into a healthier lifestyle. But that also meant the ways in which I worked, because even as a nonprofit leader, I'm still working all the time. I'm still stressed out, you know. I'm still putting myself last, right? I'm still like just living in anxiety and kind of like the hustle and bustle of productivity and capitalism, even as a nonprofit worker, even for good causes, right? So that was where I really reevaluated my life. And in order to heal, I had to get a total hysterectomy. So this was my first painting because I just couldn't get the image out of my head that there was a um no, it doesn't show me that there was a hole, where my uterus and ovaries and all of that were. And it really, in painting this image that started just like of my body and that blank space of my uterus, was it really helped me to ponder and think about what that meant for me, what that meant for humans. And it, in painting this, I realized that out of that black empty space, that the power of creation still exists. And actually, the power of creation does come from nothingness, right? That's like the catalyst for things to be created. So I try to visualize that in this image where the great mystery of that blank space is there, surrounded by like an infinity universal potential of what could be created, and then that turning into a dawn and a new beginning that's coming out from my body. I use art to challenge assumptions, and this is something that I've learned. So here's a picture of Ma'i, coyote, right? Who I think people know in our culture, and every culture is kind of like seen as a bad guy. Yes, a wise guy, but if he crosses the road, you're like, oh my gosh, oh no, we got to worry about, we're worried. It's turned into a bad thing. And for me, I also really wanted to explore that, right? And that's something that I explored through my art. And in painting, I always spend a lot of time learning and researching and asking people about stories or characters, and that I've incorporated into this piece. So there he is with this kind of like giant chaotic craziness coming out, from him, because I think he's a person that is associated with chaos, right? And that's why we're afraid of him. Um, but does that mean that he causes chaos? Sure, sometimes, but does it also mean he's a master of chaos? Yes, it does, right? So it's something, somebody that we can um, work with to maneuver chaos and chaotic times, which I feel we are definitely living in, but it's just becoming more and more apparent to everyone and to more people. And I think especially in work as a social justice activist, um, we have to really build our muscle in figuring out how to deal with chaos, how to deal with climate chaos, how to pull out order, how to pull out wisdom from times that are high anxiety, scary, angry, etc. And so I think Coyote is a good teacher in this, right? And these are the things that I pondered and learned about and can now talk about through this piece of art. One little thing I want to pull out of here too is there's a yellow kind of dot this here, and that's like one of my favorite stories of Ma'i, was when the holy people were setting the stars in the sky. They were made out of quartz crystal on a buckskin, and they were picking them one by one, placing them just so, creating constellations. And Coyote comes along and he wants to, I want to put one up too. So they give him one. And so he puts up his Ma'i Bizon, his star, right? And it can only be seen in the southern sky for, oh gosh, see, this is in my notes. I think it's 1 week out of the entire year. It has a yellow orange hue to it, right? So I just laughs, makes me laugh, right? Because he's like, I'm gonna put it right in this really weird area, and you're only gonna see it once a year, but it's also like a important marker of time, right? In a time of year. And as the story goes on, he's getting bored watching them like slowly place things. So he takes the whole buckskin blanket and just like flings all the crystals into the sky. And that's why the sky is not always orderly in every place. Okay, I use art to build understanding. So this is one of my paintings in the middle called Sankofa. And I saw this bird, which is a harpy eagle. I don't know if any of you all have ever seen it, but they look crazy. They're giant. They're like the giantess eagle in South America. They look like people. Like if you Google it and look at them, like they look like people and they just look so powerful. When I saw it, it actually reminded me of like the vibe, that power vibe that I get from Yebiches, like here. So that's what it reminded me of. And I decided to paint it like that. That's why it has green around the neck, the blue face, the feathers actually has the 12 feathers up at the top. Um, But it also reminded me in the pose that he is, where he's kind of looking over his shoulder, of this image here in the bottom right, which is Sankofa, which is from indigenous people of Africa in Ghana, I think Akan. And it's this very old concept. This bird is reaching over and taking an egg from its back. And what it means is it reflects the importance of looking back at your culture, looking back at your tradition, looking back at your elders, and your history, and bringing forth wisdom to use in the here and now. And so, being a half Navajo and half Black person, I just love to find ties, right? Important ties between people, and especially as an organizer, as we want to bring Black and Indigenous communities together in power. What are the pieces of our cultures that actually bring us together? And so I put it in this painting. Again, it's a way for me to talk about these things with different people. Oh, there it is in the big form. And then I also use art to reflect, envision, and demand justice. So BMWC was very much one of the many, many organizations and generations of people who are fighting coal mining on Black Mesa, and the Navajo Generating Station in Page, which is pictured here. This, I think, yeah, the name of this painting is Kodon Hojon Do Leil, which is how we begin our prayers, from here, from now, everything's going to be good. And it's a picture of when the Navajo Generating Station was demolished, because to me, that was like a celebratory moment. And if you ever saw the promotional materials for NGS, they always had this, like, these beautiful rocks in the background, and kind of presenting NGS as this like beautiful, desert place, as opposed to like a polluting, disgusting facility. So I always thought, I'm going to paint that when that power plant is destroyed. And so that's how I did this. I painted the land in many colors, but I painted the power plant itself in only black and white to kind of relegate it to history. It's in the past now, and from now we're going to go forward in beauty and colors. And I also put those fists in the clouds in the sky, if you can see that, just to honor all the warriors and activists who made this possible. Um, these 4 pieces, this is another example of reflecting and demanding justice, are 4 pieces of a series I created called the Ceasefire series. And I'll show them to you in a bit. I made these last year in November, so almost a year later, when Israel first started its war and genocide against Palestine. This was the first in the series, Ceasefire, or Free Palestine, as you can see in the top. And these are all 11 by 14 inches, I think, watercolor on watercolor paper. This is the second one in the series, the right to defend itself. So that phrase that kept being used in defense of Israel. Israel has the right to defend itself, but for some reason that was never, we know the reason, right? was not applied to the people in Palestine. This third one is a ceasefire series, or of the third one of the ceasefire series, and this one's called Ceasefire. We thought that was a, reasonable ask at the time, and it's a year later, right? And Israel is still bombing, and it's been bombing for a year. When I did these in November of 2023, this was how many people had been killed: 8,300 plus people, including 3,400 plus children. In my notes, which I can't access right at the moment, I had those numbers updated, but it's something like over 43,000 people now have been killed. And nearly half of those are children. We call this a war on children, but that number also did not include the people who have died through like preventable diseases because they don't have access to health care, through malnutrition because there's no access to food. That doesn't include Lebanon, Iran, or anything. So just to think, from 8,000 to over 40,000 plus people in a year is what's happening. And then the fourth one was land back, just to acknowledge that I believe Israel is a white settler colonial state, similar to the United States. And in creating these, it was just like, I didn't know what to do, right? The same feeling that I think a lot of us have, like, to be faced with all of this. So it just helped me to process through. And as I painted these, I just listened to YouTube videos, watched Instagram reels or TikToks, and just learned different things, right? And so that's what a lot of the images are that you see in here. The patterns of the kafia. I have the river and the ocean, the olive trees here, this star, which reminded me of a star quilt, that we have here in Indigenous peoples in the US, is also like one of their traditional images, like their traditional homes made out of mud bricks. Um, I had a lot of pictures of the beach because I was seeing so many like young people when they were asking them, what do you want to do when the war ends? And a lot of them were just saying they wanted to go play at the beach. So that's their um, oil, contaminating the beach because, of course, along with this colonization has come the fossil fuel industry, been giving access and rights to the natural resources along the coast and things like that. Again, just to children, it's a war against children that we're seeing. So here's some of the images. And I also wanted to share the process of this because we're going to talk about that later. I started, and this is what I would have done if we were in person doing like an art workshop. This is the idea I wanted to have with you. But uh, blank paper taped off. This is like a intuitive style of painting that I really like to do, that anyone can do, right? And so you see, I wrote "Free Palestine, ceasefire now." Just in marker, scribbled, and that's where the images came from, right? Just free flowing images, lines, and coming up with something from those, right? Like, what does it make you think of? And it's really calling on your intuition, your access to your emotions to kind of develop these. Throwing some paint on there, and then they turned out like this. So, in a summary, this is one of my most latest pieces here called Chahash Your Shadow. And so these are the things that art has really helped me to do beyond, oh, it's just something very pretty that you see. Art can help you process your emotions. It enables you to rest and reflect. It allows you to ponder and question things, to challenge colonized frameworks, as I showed you, to share Indigenous knowledge, to reflect, envision, and demand justice, to honor the divine, to access our intuition and build connections, and to provide a safe place to discuss all of these things, right? Talking about an art piece is different than going head to head on right and wrong in a debate. You know what I mean? So it allows a way to talk about things that I think can go deeper. And it does multiple things at once. So art heals. Okay, so now I want to ask you, and maybe I'll actually get off of sharing for a second, but I want to ask you, and maybe you can put it in the chat, or if we have a couple of volunteers, what does art and all of this have to do with Ganja and the Dinê New Year, do you think? Anybody got any ideas? And I'm going to look at the chat too. Art is ceremony, art is therapy, activism. Anybody want to hop on and say, what do you think all of that has to do with this time of year? You guys being shy.
I know I don't want to speak. If someone wants to say anything. This is such a good question though. I'm like, ooh, this is really awesome. Like for me, when you have the mask up, like that also signifies, that ceremony, the Yebache ceremony with this that just happened. And for me, I'm like, I don't know if they would I don't know, I just feel like it's just time of like expression and like expressing ourselves just through our fashion and I feel like through our songs. Um just that
Mm.
I feel like there's a lot happening right now that is through art, but I wouldn't, yeah, I'm just like I feel like yeah, I'm like it's for me I'm like it's just a part of our life.
Mhm.
It's within us, you know, to have that connection and expression through our regalia and our songs and our dancing, our stories that are we could I think we can start telling more stories in the winter. But I think like, you know, things like
Yeah.
that. I feel like this is just that time um to
Mhm.
really showcase. Now you got really me thinking like, what about our baskets and harvesting the baskets and like all of that stuff, everything. Oh my, but I hope that gives people time to kind of think and maybe want to join in on the conversation because this is a really good question.
Yeah, thanks, Jahan. Hopefully all can hear me okay. The Wi-Fi is a little slow, but
Yeah.
I'm here with my sister and my mom, and we're like cooking, and at the same time we're listening, and so it's a really nice moment. But my sister also had a comment.
Hi
Mhm.
guys, my name is Mallory, and I'm just listening in. So thank you for having us. I was kind of my interpretation was this time of year being getting colder, and um, it's sort of like we're not outside as much; we're inside. So how do we keep ourselves busy? And that's through like art and weaving and painting, and a lot of people do things with their hands, and I just see that as a good time of. I guess that's how I made a connection.
Totally. Yes, thank you. Exactly. And of course, you know, there's lots of answers. I'm gonna put my screen back on. If there's something you add, please, you know, put it in the chat. And again, I'll pause again a little bit later. And let me just pop this back on. Okay, yes. So everything you said, yes, exactly. And you know, because I think of a lot of things in terms of the four sacred mountains because they embody so much, right? And I live near one. So you know, each of these mountains, each of these directions really represent all kinds of things: the times of day, the seasons, the deities, the elements, the plants, the animals, the clans, planning processes, colors, you know, animal, like all kinds of things. And we're here, you know, in the fall season is associated with here under Dogo Sleet, the western side of our homelands. And this is some of the things that, excuse me, this time of year represents. Um, the fall season, I like that all the directions also represent plants. And this one here is associated with squash because squash grows together. So it's also reflecting that this is a time of year for family and people doing things together and right? It's a time for love, for emotions, for storytelling, for sharing. It's, you know, and then maybe non-Navajo way, it's a spooky time of year too, right? It's like the veil is thinning. It's the fall equinox. It's a big change. And harvesting, and again, this what we call the New Year, is, and I've heard multiple ways of what that has been interpreted as mean, but one of it is to mean half, or yes, the separation of the seasons. So kind of like the middle of the big seasons of winter and summer, and it's the equinox times as opposed to the solstice times, right? It's the equality time, not like the maximum of one or other time. This mountain's also associated with changing woman, one of our most important deities. So I um, associate this time as like a big harbinger again of change. Um, yes, so let's put that there. And I should also say this is a female mountain associated again with changing woman. They say this one, Dogoslid, and then Sisna Jene are female mountains, and then Sodzich and Dogoslid are male mountains. So here is one of my paintings of the mountain here, San Francisco Peaks, trying to reflect some of those things. This is called 2020 Vision. because I had an image in 2020 that there was a giant dragon that lived on the mountain, and I just wanted to paint it. So that's what I did. But some of the things that I was trying to really show in this is, yes, the colors of the fall, especially yellow. These like images here of a heart. This is love, it's relationships. This is also painted with the sun this way. So this is painted at the sunrise time. So in that way, I also connected it to Cisnagene, our eastern mountain of the dawn time, to kind of redouble up the femaleness of these mountains. I put that dragon on top, which is actually like from the Lord of the Rings. I'm just really thinking like how, especially because here, Snowball, the ski resort on top of the mountain is such a contentious issue between the tribes and the non-Navajos in the city of Flagstaff. Like, how could I get non-native people to kind of at least recognize the power of this mountain? Because to me, it's like the mountain's so strong, like we're the ones that's going to get hurt, and you could say that about Mother Earth as well. So trying to recognize like the real strength of this mountain to like, rules this place. And one of my little favorite aspects of our creation stories, and when we came into this world and they brought up the mountains from the previous world, they said that the holy people, this was the only mountain that they couldn't move. The other ones, they could move around the landscape and place them here and there, but this one, so strong, so powerful. I think of it kind of like as the auntie, the grandmother mountain. They couldn't move it. That's how powerful it is. And then this was one of my first attempts at an abalone shell too, because they say this mountain is adorned with abalone shell. All right, so this is a series of 12 paintings, mini paintings. They're 4 by 4 inches that I did, that I called moon clots. And here is, you can see me now. Here's mine. This was the first one I made before I made those 12, like way back in 2020. And I use it as a clock, so this was it came from an idea or an inspiration that I had when I was talking to my mom. And my mom said that when she was little, she grew up in Sawmill, Arizona. So there was a sawmill there, right? One of the first resources to be taken was timber from the Oshkai Mountains. And my grandpa worked there. So my mom is 75 now, or she'll be 75 in December. So she said when she was little, her first kind of like really orientation or thought of what a clock was that there were 2 whistles, one when her dad went to work and one when he came back, like at 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. And that just amazed me because I was like, I can't imagine not knowing what a clock is. Like not knowing what time is and not knowing, or not like having the habit of checking time and scheduling things. Like that must have been a crazy freeing way to live for the amount of time that she was able to as a young child anyway. And so it inspired me to create these moon clocks and to start trying to train my mind to think in terms of the moon cycle rather than like the calendar or the Western calendar. And a clock, a regular, clock. And it's very challenging. So it's like you really have to pay attention to it and just be like, even like a vibe. When I used to have my moon time, I'd be like, oh man, I'm feeling so this way. The full moon must be coming up. Not that everybody follows the pattern of the full moon, but and then I'd be like, oh, it is the full moon coming up. And and I'll switch my little clock around to different times, to just really put myself in that part of the cycle on a regular basis. So altogether with these 12 in mind, that's 13 moons, which is actually how many months we had in our traditional Dinê calendar, or any lunar calendar that people use around the world. Is there's 13 months, 28 days per month, right? And we That's why our Western calendar has a leap year every 4 years, because they have to catch up to this natural cycle. And if you actually just had 13 months, you would be on the natural cycle, right? So it's weird. And each of these 13 months are tied to the land, in our tradition, to the land and our life ways in specific ways. You know, they teach us how to behave, they teach us what actions to take. You know, for example, like January is Yashnit's Ace, which is like they cooking snow or burning snow. So it's like that's when you melt snow to have water, have access to water. February is a tabillage, because that's when the baby eagles are being created, or being born, or starting out. So that's when babies are beginning. March is Wajid, because that's the sound that the baby eagles make when they're crying to get fed, Wajid, you know. So, and then the later months are like, this is when you plant, this is when you can pick these certain things, right? So they all are related to actual things that we do in this region that's connected to the land and life ways. But to fit into the Western calendar, we had to eliminate a month, right? So Gajah isn't October, it's the 13th month, if that makes sense. Or it isn't, because it's actually debatable. To some people, the 13th month is this time, the new year, or to some people, it's actually in the spring. And that's something that I actually love about our Dinê people, is that there are different aspects to the story, right? Even like people tell different stories. People run kinaldas in different ways, right? People have different rules, you know, in their clan or family or region that they're from. And I actually appreciate that, because it shows like that culture is not just a rigid stone that's written forever as word certain way. And that our laws are the natural laws, you know, and living in alignment with this physical reality. All right. This one, I'm sneaky and got my notes while I had the screen off for a second. Okay, so in preparing for this, I like really went down the rabbit hole, like what is the 13th month? And, you know, I read all these, like, look through all my little books, like, you know, these are different things that I have. I watched YouTube videos and read little articles, and especially I think a super helpful one was that one YouTube channel by, it's called Navajo Traditional Teachings, and it's that elder named Wally Brown, and he's a Navajo historian. So that was very helpful, but even him in his different videos says different things, right? Or has different theories. So it's kind of a mystery. But I think what I gathered, that it's definitely a cold time, which could be the spring or the fall, right? The start of winter or the end of winter. They say it's when families come together, play games, tell stories, share history. But it's like quiet time. That month, the 13th month, is supposed to be quiet time. So there's no ceremonies, there's no rattles, no loud singing. You know, it's a quiet time um, where you're being inside and you're learning about your history, your teachings, the stories, and things like that. So I feel like that could be spring or fall. But I, you know, after doing this, I'm personally leaning towards the new year being in spring. And here's why. Um, so in Mr. Brown's videos, he was giving a lot of like names to this time of year, or things that happen, and those names kind of point to the spring to me. So it's a time when things are coming back to life, right? They said the lightning is waking things up. Those beings that haven't been with us human people for the season are coming back, including the insects. There's like stretching, and moving is beginning. And it's about being grateful to the holy people through making it through the past season. Of course, we can always be grateful to the holy people, But to me, that kind of points towards spring. And I heard a bunch of different words for it, and I don't know how to pronounce them very well. I am not a fluid speaker, but some of the words that I heard associated with that time, and maybe some of you all know it, were da'ashkash, da'ashij, inenahaka, and nahat ash. So, and then those words are some of those things that I was talking about, like waking up, that type of stuff. So I don't know. To me, that points more towards springtime. Also because Ganjit means halfway or separating. That indicates to me that it's not like the start of, right? But it's in between. And he was also saying that Ganja also means like at the top. So that's an interesting way for me to think about this time too, because that could be a celebration of New Year's when you kind of reach a peak, right? So spring, things are growing, things have grown, and now it's the moment of harvest. And then we go back down into like a restful time and then begin again. So interesting. And I was also thinking, I told you I went down the rabbit hole, but like October, right, is supposed to be the 10th month in the Western calendar, but then OCT, that prefix actually means 8, like octagon or octopus with its 8 legs. You know what I mean? So it's like, if this is actually the 8th month, then the first month would be March. So that theory says that the 13th month, the beginning of the new year, depending on whatever, is actually in between March and April. And that makes a lot of sense to me. But the good news is it doesn't really matter which one is New Year's or which one's not, right? Because it's all about the cycle. Because time is, the way we look at it, is cycles, not a linear, forever moving forward type of thing. So they're all part of it, right? Including winter and summer, and they're all part of the same whole. The last thing I want you to consider is, what are the impacts of having us change our calendar? Like getting rid of that 13th month. How would that impact us? And how would living outside of those natural cycles of the moon impact us? And so I'm going to, again, stop sharing for a little bit and ask y'all for some feedback. What do you think?
That just got me thinking of climate change and how for a lot of people who harvest like maple or who plant seeds, that's going to be throwing us off. And, those times are connected to prayer and song. But if it's getting warmer and not going to be, harvesting at a certain time or being able to plant, like planting is actually kind of hard, like to figure out when it's a good time because we get like a late frost in June, which is crazy. So yeah,
Right.
getting out of those natural cycles. Yeah.
Yep.
It scares us.
Totally. And again, people pop in or put it in the chat if you want. I think there's a lot of again, I'm just inviting you to ponder that, even after this workshop. But like some very simple or quick ways that I thought about it was like, what makes us easier to assimilate in mainstream society, right? Because we're disconnected from the natural cycles, then we're like disconnected from our traditional life ways. And that means we're disconnected from our ability to take care of ourselves and be self-sufficient, right? So that's easy, because what's the point of getting rid of the 13th month? Like, really, what is the point? I don't understand. Why did they decide to do that? Because again, even in the older calendars of Europe, they were 13 as well. So there was a point to that. Okay. The next thing I want to do is, and I should have told you guys to have, to grab a piece of paper and pen, but if you don't have it, that's fine. I just want to kind of lead you in a little bit of like a guided meditation or free writing. And free writing is, again, I'm doing this because these are great ways to access your intuition. And I love seeing like on Indigenous Lifeways, you guys also do like meditations and things like that. So you recognize, the power of just being still and allowing things to come to you rather than thinking really hard about it, right? Like, because our intuition gives us so much knowledge as well to just our mind turning and turning, Okay, so I can't see you, but I'm trusting that you are doing this. You can either grab a pen and paper and do some free writing. And the rule of free writing is just keep writing. Don't pick up your pen and don't worry about how you're saying it or the grammar or anything like that. You're just letting thoughts flow out of you. And again, not thinking too hard. And if you don't have a pen and paper and you'd rather just like sit still, close your eyes without you do, but just like try to focus yourself in your body and listen to the questions I'm going to ask you and see what answers come to you. Okay. So, Ganjit was on the beginning of this month, October 2nd, 27 days ago. It's a marker, but really it's a vibe of this whole season that we're in, right? The new moon itself marks the halfway point or the separation of the seasons. Again, I'm thinking of it in my mind as that kind of arc or cycle that we've reached a pinnacle of it, a pinnacle of our year. And we're headed down into harvesting and resting and reflecting, hibernating, storytelling, shoe games, being with family inside. We're beginning that now at this time of year. So we are in a celebration mode, right? Because we've reached the maximum, the pinnacle of the life of this year, if you want to think of it that way, you know? And we're heading into like the death season, which is not something to be afraid of, right? No, death scares us, but and I think that's why like this is the spooky time with skeletons and things like that, because it is also honoring the season of death where things die, because we know that things cannot be born, cannot be grown without things dying, right? That the leaves provide the nutrition for the next plants that are coming next year. They provide the safe place for the insects, you know. So death enables life, right? And that's the season we're heading to again until spring comes and life begins anew. So, what I would like you to do is look back at the past half of this year. This past summer, this past spring, going all the way back to the spring. What have you learned? I'm sure there's many things you learned, but maybe there's something that's popped up even more. What have you learned? What has been born? What has grown? And what is ready to be harvested now for you? And I'm going to just give you a minute or so to think about that or write it down if you're doing the writing and answer that question. What has been born? What is grown? And what's ready to be harvested now? Okay. My next question for you is, you figured out kind of what has grown for you, what's ready to be harvested. And now we're in the season of harvesting and sharing. And yeah, so my next question to you, and I'll give you another minute for this, is how will you share what you have grown? It does nobody any good to keep it inside. How will you share what you have grown or what has grown within you? And I'll give you a little bit for that. then my final question to you then is moving forward, heading into the winter, resting, and then we're going to be, and I'm saying reborn in the spring. How will what you've grown carry you through the winter? And how will it help you reemerge in the spring stronger and leveled up? I'll give you another minute to think about that. How will what you've grown carry you through the winter? And how will it help you emerge in the spring stronger and ready and leveled up? Okay, you all still with me? All right. I'm going to ask you if any volunteers did have anything they want to share, but before we do that, thank you, Tiffany. There's a few more slides on my PowerPoint that I'm going to share for some ideas and tips for how you can turn what you've just envisioned into art. Okay. So 1 second. All right. This is one of my paintings called Shot in the Dark. I was going to have this up when we were doing the guided meditation, but I didn't. So here's Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper, and the North Star. I forget the names in Navajo, but that's basically this whole constellation goes together. This is the woman, this is the man, this is the central fire, and the Hogan. And the way that they're positioned in this picture is like the end of spring and beginning of summer, which is interesting because I wasn't even thinking about this New Year stuff when I painted this. So interesting. See, things pop up even after you've created the art. Anyway, okay, let me close this. Some ideas and tips for creating art, because I want you all to like feel confident in creating art. I went through the ceasefire series with you earlier and showed you that process of kind of just like taping off, scribbling, and then creating images on a theme. This is another set of ones that I did last year around the Western New Year to give to friends and family. And they were just kind of like, you know, I'm one of those people who has post-it notes on my wall with like different sayings and things and motivation stuff. So that's where these came from. But this is one way you can do it. If there's a phrase, if there is an image, if there's something that came to you during that little session, you could create art doing the little scribble and intuitive method, right? So this one was, if it is to be, it's up to me. And just to show you, like, here's the I, if it is to be, you know, and they create these little images. So if it is to be, it's up to me. I flow with the universe. This is actually the one that I ended up with this past year. And let me tell you, it was accurate in predicting my 2024. And I'm going to tell you, flowing with the universe isn't as easy as it sounds. Okay. I am connected to Mother Earth was one. Just to give you a sense of like with the scribbles, what kind of little images can come up. I love myself first. I hold healthy boundaries. I think something that all of us can work on. I give and receive in balance. I trust my intuition. And I refuse to deny the truth. So that's one idea of how you can do stuff. And then those were very specific, right? Like I wrote down words and created something from that, but you don't have to do that. You can just make scribbles and they don't have to be like very specific images connected to a theme, but it could just be more like this, shapes and things that come to you, and still turns out really good, I think, right? And just playing around and see what comes. Here's another idea. So I've been participating in the Indian Arttober as much as I can, and I was just challenging myself to do some sketches, and these are like 4 inches by 5 inches, like, so there's a little notepad. There's a prompt every day, right, of So one day, this one was, where's the prompt? This one was three sisters. So I put these three little seeds. There was a bear, there was grandma, coffee, storm, you know. So joining these kind of little art things that happen every now and then, were like little challenges to just be like, what comes when I think of this word? What image comes to me? What story comes to me? You know, and just working from there. I think a big part of art is like allowing your intuitive side, for me anyway, to come out and just be like, oh, that's the image that came to mind, or oh, isn't that funny that that's what popped out, you know? And it helps you learn, I think, about yourself. Things that are kind of hidden, you know, and not in your logical mind all the time. You could write. So for all of my paintings, I usually write a haiku, which is a short poem, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and 5 syllables. And I use that as like, if I had an art show, I use that as a little like description on the side rather than like explaining giant paragraphs, because I could talk about them for forever. But really trying to like boil down the essence into a haiku, which is really the point of haikus, you know, is in such a short and just only so many syllables, only 3 lines, can you hone in on the essence of something, you know? So like for this painting, my haiku was, oh, and this painting is called Everybody is Dancing in the Moonlight. But the haiku was, all is connected. She's faithful in all seasons. Simply remember. I think that kind of fit with the theme of today. And for this one, my haiku was, grandmother mountain, old immovable treasure, crowned always in white, right? So getting into, again, the essence. There's dancing, there's longer forms of writing, there's different kinds of art, you know, there's storytelling, there's the basket making, all the things that you guys were talking about, beading, weaving, all the things that you all were bringing up earlier is part of that, right? And I just want to show, this is my nephew when he created his little thing, right? So art is for everyone. I have a friend who is a opera singer. And I was like, oh, I wish I could sing, you know, and I was telling her that, and she was like, you don't have to be good to sing. She's like, that's not the point of singing, right? And that just really kind of changed the way I look at singing and at art, you know, that it's like, again, it's just like this kind of capitalist, white supremacist, patriarchal society has taught us that it's only worth doing something if you can make money from it. But what I'm also trying to share with you is that's not true, right? That you shouldn't not make art because you can't sell it, right? There's so many other reasons to create art that I shared with you earlier. Okay. And oh, yes, you can also buy art from artists like me. So I wanted to give you guys who are on this call today, if you want, no pressure, don't worry about it. But if you do, you can go check out what I have for sale on my website. If you put in the discount code Art of Creation, which was the title of this session, then you'll get 25% off. And except for the limited edition prints that I just put on there yesterday because they needed a little bit more time. But everything else, we get 25% off. And I want to challenge you that it's going to start now. It started already at the beginning. The discount started at the beginning of this workshop, but it's going to end the day of the next new moon. So it's up to you to figure out what that is. The day of the new moon, it ends. Okay. So just another little moon thing for you. And then the last part is this. So here's my website, www.jihangearon.art. There's the QR code, or if you want to check me out on Instagram, there's the QR code, and it's at Jihan Gearon. Okay. And that's it for the PowerPoint and the workshop. I want to say a hiahet to all of you that came, a hiahet to Indigenous Lifeways for having these awesome workshops. Yeah, so now I think it's open to turn back to you, Crystal, or I mean, for Q&A. And I would really, no pressure, but I would like, if a couple of you want to share anything that came out of that guided meditation, any ideas you have for creating art, I'd love to hear it right now.